So we're on part 1, chapter 3, paragraph 3, which in the regular edition, Hebrew edition, is page 23, and I imagine that in the translation is double 47. So just to recap where we're holding, the paragraph before was talking about the purpose of creation, and that was in order to give the ultimate good that Hashem can give to a creation. It means he made the purpose of the creation in order to give the ultimate good, and that is to be connected to him. The ultimate good is to be connected to God in the greatest connection possible. And in order to have that, it's necessary that that creation should attain its own perfection. And he explained that length, the purpose has the double purpose over there. One is that it should be compatible. And the other point was that that's the way to connect, that since every perfection is an offshoot of God's perfection, so by attaining perfections, you're holding on more to God. And the epitome of connection could be by becoming the epitome of perfection that this creation could attain. And he ended off the paragraph before that in order to have such a situation, you need a lot of creations, but everything else is just the background, only the scenery, the stage for that one creation. That is the purpose of all creation. And as he ends off, that's man. Man is the main creation. Everything else, even those that are above him, like angels, and surely those that are below him, like animals and anything else here. Organic, inorganic, everything gets created, everything that exists in all the galaxies and everything that we know to be creation, all that is just for the purpose of man, in order that he should be able to have the stage he needs in order to attain perfection. He also has to be the deficiencies that he has to be able to get rid of. So God created those issues, those concepts of perfection and deficiency, which he explains at the end is going to be intellect and good character, which we said intellect means knowing God. And on the other side would be physicality, which is the block, and people are blocked from understanding God, knowing about God. That's the Homer versus the Haskalah. And in contrast to the good midos was the bad midos, that Hashem made the concept of bad character traits. And that's what man's job is going to be, to attain the perfection by attaining knowledge of God and to attaining the good character traits that are available. That was more or less the paragraph before. And we got into this paragraph 3, which he said that it's in order that to attain what we just said, that the man himself should be the one to acquire his perfection. It's necessary that there should be free choice. It means even if he would do the acts of attaining perfection, but it was not a choice, it would have been forced upon him. So then it's not called that he did it either. It has to be that he did it out of free will. And that choice necessitates there should be an inclination to both sides. He has to have an equal inclination to good and to bad. And in the last paragraph that we learned, paragraph 2, that was additional point, that not that man was made as one unit that has two inclinations, but he was made as a composition of two halves, and that is the body and the soul. Each one has its own nature. The body naturally is inclined to physicality, and the soul is a spiritual creation that's naturally inclined to intellect and spirituality. And now that man is fused from both of these halves, now he has an inner conflict in choosing good. That's as far as we got. And now we're up to paragraph 3. God's goodness decreed that there should be a limit to this effort, this endeavor that's necessary for man in order to attain his perfection. I mean, it's not an infinite endeavor that's necessary to attain more and more and more perfection. Is that possible in a limited time to attain all the perfection that's necessary? And when he's going to finish that effort necessary, then he's going to be able to attain his perfection and to be able to enjoy that accomplishment, whatever you accomplished in that time, for eternity. It means that you might think that for a limited effort, he deserves a limited reward. And for an infinite reward, he would have to have an infinite endeavor and effort. So he says, no, there's going to be a limited effort that's necessary time-wise, and in the merit of that, in that time, he's able to perfect himself in a way that he'll be able to enjoy perfection and the results of his perfection forever. So there are two times. Man is made in a way that there are two time zones for his existence. One is the time that he's supposed to be working, and as they'll say, coming up, that means Olam Hazeh. and then there's a time for his reward. There's man avoda and zman kibbul haschar. There's a time that he's exerting himself and working, and then there's going to be the time that he's going to be accepting the reward. And as he said, that the time for effort is limited. Hashem's goodness makes that it's possible in a limited time to be able to do the necessary work that it could accomplish whatever perfection he needs. But there is no limit to the receiving of the reward. The reward is going to be for eternity. The reward is going to be eternal. So there are two times that man is going to, in his existence, the existence of man has two time zones. One is the time for working and earning his goodness, and then the second is going to be enjoying the results of that goodness. He goes on to say in paragraph 4 that the state of affairs, the state of his situation changes inherently in those two times. Means that the state of man that he is in this world is not the time of his work is not the same that it is in the time of his reward. And he's going to explain how it's inherently necessary. It can't be that it should be both overlapping. You might have thought that maybe we'll just suggest a possibility what would have been if it wouldn't have been that way. It could have been that man is constantly in a state of earning more and more, and he's not constantly getting more and more. You might say, like in this world, people are earning money and they're constantly using it. So both of them overlap each other. He doesn't have two different time zones, one that he only works and then one that and then he's finished and then he just enjoys. But he's constantly in a state of effort, endeavor, and also enjoying whatever there is in this world. But he's saying it's not like that. In the big picture, this world is the time of effort. The purpose of this world is not to enjoy. We'll eventually see more about the state of this world. That's not the purpose of this world. Of course, it's very enjoyable, and part of the vote is going to be also to enjoy it in the proper way. But the state of affairs in this world is when there is a inclination to both sides. Thank you so much. Thank you. And the state of the enjoyment of the result of his work is a different state of affairs. It means the man is going to be in a different environment, and his essence is going to be different. That's what he says now in paragraph 4. Just as the times change, so too the situation, his state has to change also, and also everything else that happens to him. Mikrim would mean things that happen to him. Maybe the word would be the accidents, but that's not the way we use it in regular conversational English. We call accident something else, but there's a word that would be called inherently and accidentally. So the state of affairs of man has to change from the first stage of endeavor and effort to the second stage of enjoyment and reward. Why? Maybe just to give an overview of what he's going to say is that the state of the time of effort, which is this world, necessitates, as he says, that he has to have an equal inclination to good and to bad, to physicality and to spirit and to God. So that means that he has to have a natural inclination, like we said, is a guf that's going to be naturally inclined to materialism. That is not the state that would be the reward state. The reward state has to be that he's free of all that. That shouldn't be in his composition. He shouldn't be made up of such stuff, which is animalistic. If we would just say before we said about a guf and a neshama, we could translate it to the combination of an animal and an angel. That's what the two parts of man is. The guf. If you just take the guf of man, not only the physical flesh and blood, but we're talking about all the animalistic traits that are in man. That's the half of him that tends towards physicality, materialism, and the other part is an angel that he's inclined towards God. So there's a fusion of an animal, so to speak, and an angel, so to speak, which is the body and the soul. So the animal part of him is necessary in this world. If he wouldn't have it, then he would be an angel, and there wouldn't be any inclination towards bad. There wouldn't be any test. There wouldn't be any accomplishment in him making any decisions, because that's what we said, that he would have been forced into it, so to speak. He has no inclination towards the other side. So in this world, it's necessary to have the animal part of him. But in Olam Haba, the animal part of him is disruptive. That's going to be something that's going to be an impediment to his closeness to Hashem. So that's what he's going to say now, that the state of man, not only his environment, but even the state of man has to change. The essence of man has to change from this world to the world to come, or from the time of effort, endeavor, to the time of reward. So he says in this world it's necessary that he should be in a disposition, but the properties of disposition has to be in a situation that he should have to be able to accomplish this ishtadlus. It's necessary that he should have an inner conflict between the intellect and the physicality. Those are the two parts of man, the neshama and the guf. And it's necessary that it shouldn't be anything that would impede the materialistic part of him to have what to say, to have a say in the matter, so to speak, and has to be nothing that should impede the intellect. It means it has to be an equal, balanced inclination to both sides, and you can't have anything that's holding back the physicality, nothing that's holding back the intellect. You have to have that. They should be able to have a full fight. There should be a battle between both parts of him. So first he says that neither side can be held back. Nothing should be ma'akev. Nothing that should be, that's the word he used, ma'akev. Nothing should be impeding, not the chomer, not the seichel. And then on the other hand, he says also it's the same idea, but he says there can't be anything that's going to be empowering either side. It's not, wouldn't be proper in this world to have that the guf should be empowered more than it's supposed to be, and not that the neshama should be empowered more than it's supposed to be. Then he says, like in parentheses, we would have thought that it would be better that the neshama should be more empowered and that the guf should be able to be lowered. But he says, even though that sounds theoretically, superficially, at first glance, it sounds like that would have been better. But he says it's not, because the purpose is that man should have the decision and he has to have an equal conflict, or else it wouldn't be that he did it. That's what he says now. Even though on one hand it would have seemed that it would have been better that the neshama should be stronger and the guf should be weaker. But according to the true intention that God desires for man, which is that he should gain his perfection on his own, so it's necessary that it wouldn't be good if he'd have the neshama that's stronger than the guf. It has to be that he made the choice. Make sense? That if the purpose would just to be that he should be in a state of good, not that he did it, then we would say it's better that he should have a bigger neshama and a weaker guf, maybe no guf at all, just be a neshama. But that isn't the purpose. The purpose is he should acquire it. In order for him to acquire it, it has to be an equal balance. Yes, please.
It's interesting to compare this a little bit to Desi's piece of the theory, because Desi, I think, which is an idea of trying to shift the balance throughout your life, and it seems like it's almost to get to this point where you don't have to put in any effort to do the right thing anymore.
I think he's saying that the person does have free choice, but as will be mention of that idea coming up, that as a person tilts the scale towards one way, so now he's more on that side. It means that if a person does good, and he now it's more of a given. He himself strengthened the neshama, and he said before that's what happens, that they have an effect on each other. It isn't that it always stays the same. The more that a person accomplishes good, so then his neshama is getting stronger. And then it's going to be, you could say it's easier for him to fight now because the neshama is stronger. And if he fails, so then his guf is getting stronger. It makes it more difficult. And that's what happened really historically. That's what happened by Adam Arishon, that he failed. And that's going to be today's subject, that man tilted the scale. He did it himself. And then it does become more difficult. But he's first talking about the state of man that God created him. This is the beginning of creation, when Hashem made man. The blueprint how Hashem made man.
But
afterwards, what?
But this isn't stagnant. I mean, his idea of effort is not something that forces your hand to make.
Nothing forces. Right? Nothing forces. At this point, it was made equal balance, and he has a choice. Once he made the choice, so now it's tilted towards one side, and we'll see that man, he tilts himself, and he really said it already before that it's made in page 18. I'm not sure what page it is by the other, probably double 36 or something. He said in chapter 2, towards the end of paragraph 1. So he did say that. I got it wrong. 1 second. I got it wrong. I'm sorry. It's right. It's right before. I'm sorry. Just on this chapter 3 that he said that that a person is magbir the neshama, then it elevates and it elevates the guf also. And if he gives into the chomer, so then the neshama becomes lower. So he says this point that it can shift, become stronger and weaker. But that's his point is that each person is within a certain range that he can't do more and he can't do less, but he has a range of bechira. He seems to be. I think we'll get to that also. So that was his point over here, that in the time of the effort of man, which is going to say is this world, so then it's necessary that he should be given a equal balance between the pull of the body and the pull of the soul. But now he says, continues to say, but at the time of the reward, then that would be a problem. If man would have that animalistic nature in him, so then that's impeding, that's an impediment, that's interfering, because if we understand that the reward is going to be being connection to Hashem, so the animal part of him is in the way. Means if the schar would have been something else, not the connection to God, not the actual elevation of man in a way that he gets closer and closer be'etzem, so then he could have talked about that he could have this stage could have continued indefinitely. But since the nature of the reward is to be close to God, so he has to become more and more godly. If he has still an animalistic urges in him, so that's going to be an interference with the reward, which is closeness to God. That's what he says now. At the time of receiving the reward, it's necessary that it should be in an opposite state. Any dominion that the physicality of him is going to have at that time, it's going to be darkening and interfering with the neshama, that it wouldn't be able to be clinging to its creator. I mean, since the nature of the reward is to be cling to God, that's the nature, that's the reward. If the reward would have been something else, we could talk about it. But since the reward is to be connected to God, so the animalistic materialism and physicality is something that's in the way. At the time of the reward, it has to be that only the neshama should have dominion. That should be the dominating force within man. Again, man is composed of both. So the dominating force has to be only the neshama, and the physicality should not be dominating. Now, he doesn't say, this is very important, that he doesn't say that the physicality of man doesn't exist. I might have thought that at that time, no more guf. The guf is finished, it had its job. But he says, no, it doesn't say that. He just says that it shouldn't be dominating. The neshama should be dominating, and the physicality of man should be drawn after it. And the physicality of man should be drawn after the neshama in a way that it shouldn't be interfering and impeding on it at all. So that point, maybe he's not stressing it over here, but this is one of the yisodos, that the eternal reward is not going to be that it's only be neshama. This is what the Ramchal refers to in explaining Chiyas HaMesim. Chiyas HaMesim means that there's going to be a guf and a neshama. There's resurrection of the dead is not a temporary kind of reward, and we're going to be back to where we are now. People sometimes think superficially about the resurrection of the dead, that we have our life right now in this state of living that we're experiencing, that we have a body and a soul, and then the person dies, and then he's going to be revived again to be what he is now. And that might be also, people could talk about if that's going to be eternal, will live as we understand man to be right now eternally, or that eventually that's also going to be over and then it'll only become soul, as some of Horsham suggested. But Ramchal says that both of those are not true. The way that man is now, the physical part of him is very dominating. And the soul has to work hard in order to keep afloat and maybe to get strong, to empower and try to win. But the state of Chiyas HaMesim is not going to be that we're going to be back to where we are now. Just to be a temporary death, and then to go back to where we are now. That wouldn't be a happy story. The happy story is going to be that we're going to get together the neshama and the guf, but the guf is going to be existing without any dominance, without being dominating. It's going to be is the word docile, that it's going to be subjected and just drawn to the neshama. Means that the chomer, the physicality of man, is going to be elevated more and more, and the neshama is going to be the one who is in the lead and leading the guf, and the guf is going to be happy to be drawn after the neshama. The importance of this is that Chiyas HaMesim is forever. The guf forever exists. We're not talking about the tangible. We don't. That's not the point so much to say if it's going to be the physicality and the way we know it now. It could be a different level of physicality, but whatever it's going to be still physicality. Man is always going to be a combination of the chomer and the how does he call it? The guf and the neshama. There's always going to be a guf, but it's not going to be in the same way that it is in this world. That the guf is very strong, it's dominating, and it's putting up a fight. That's necessary in this world in order to be able to have the internal conflict that's necessary to make a choice in this world. But when it comes to time for Olam Haba, so then the guf has to exist, and we'll talk about Kesem Mesim later on, but it has to exist, but not that it should have any dominating force. And he ends off this paragraph, that's why God created two worlds, or you can say the world is two times. Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba. This world and the world to come. Olam Hazeh means that's the time and the nature, it's the natural laws of this world. That's what's necessary for man as long as he's in the effort stage in this world. So he has to have the stage of Olam Hazeh. Olam Haba, the world to come has to be the place and the laws, the nature of Olam Haba, which is fitting at the time of getting the reward. So what did he say, just to sum it up, what he said so far in this today? He said in Oz Gimel that there's a time that we said that man has to have the free choice in order to gain his own perfection, to become inherently that perfection connected to God. He has to connect it himself. So he has a choice of choosing perfection or deficiency and acquiring it for himself. But that has to be, that's limited. Hashem doesn't want to make that should be eternal, as he explains that it wouldn't be able to be eternal. It wouldn't, since the reward is going to be connected to Hashem, so it's impossible to have that continuing into the reward. So there are two separate times. One is the time of his endeavor, his effort. The other one is time of his reward. The time of effort is limited. The time of the reward is going to be unlimited. It's going to be eternal. And then in paragraph 4, he says that not only the times change, but also the essence of man change. During the time of the work and the effort in this world, it's necessary that it should be an equal balance between the draw, the inclination of physicality against the draw to Hashem, and neither one should be impeded, neither one should be empowered. But in the time of Olam Haba, it's necessary that the guf should exist, but it shouldn't have any influence, no pull. It should be the one that's being pulled, not the one that's pulling, because since the reward is to be connected to Hashem, any kind of physicality there that's going to be dominating is going to be interfering. So it's going to be existing without having any dominion. That's what he calls Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. This world is the time, the place, and nature that's necessary for the struggle. And the Olam Haba is the place and nature of the environment that's going to be only enjoying and being connected to God and all the good that is included in that connection, the Shleimus, the Hana, that which is the purpose of creation. If that's good, before we go further, any comments on what we just learned? Because now starts a new subject, which goes on probably the rest of the day today. Yeah, we have to finish a little bit earlier today because tomorrow's getting early. We'll try to stop by 10:02, and after the break, after the summer break, so we'll get back again. We'll make it adjust the time. So we have about 15 or less minutes. So if that's good, we'll continue with the next subject. Go ahead. Anything?
If you want to just I want to, in the beginning said that God's goodness decree that there will be a limit.
That right. That it's not forever. The struggle is not an unlimited struggle.
Okay. Oh, there's a time clock.
Right.
Okay,
right. And the Gemara talks about 6,000 years. That this world is 6,000, and then it comes to Moshe Mashiach. That's the 7th millennia. Then it goes on to Olam Haba. That's what the Gemara says that the time limit of this world is. Each person also in his own lifetime also has a limited time. The time that each individual has, also the whole world as a whole is also limited. It's not going to continue the stage of this world. It's going to go on to the world to come, humanity as a whole. Okay, now starts the issue about the sin of Adam HaRishon. That starts over here. In 5, he introduces the subject, and 6 and 7 is going to talk about the state of man before the sin, and then 8 and 9 is going to be the state of man after the sin. So he starts. Paragraph 5. What's also necessary to know, the state of mankind, mankind, is not it was not originally the way we see him now. The way if you study mankind now, that's not the way to understand how mankind was at the beginning of creation. There was a big change in mankind. That was the sin of the first man. Both man and the world changed from what it was originally. Before the sin, Hashem created man and the world, and there was a big change by the sin of Adam Rishon, the sin of the first man. The details of that change and its effects are many. We'll elaborate it as we go on. The differences that changed. It comes out that when you speak about mankind and discerning all of his topics about man, they're double. You have to talk about two times, a double subject. Whenever you talk about man, you have to talk about him in a double sense. Why? Because you have to talk about man before the sin and man after the sin. It isn't the same man. Man changed. So when you talk about mankind, everything we've been talking about till now, he's going to say that was man before the sin. That was the plan of God, how he made him, and that was how he existed before the sin, which didn't take too long. The sin was right away. But that was what man was before the sin, and then the state of man changed after the sin. And man, as we see him today, is man after the sin. So not everything's the same as we pictured him till now. Hashem, as we're going to explain, and right away goes on to explain it. So in the next two paragraphs, 6 and 7, he's going to explain the state of man before the sin, and then 8 and 9, he's going to explain man after the sin. And just to point out that the contrast is going to be 8 against 6 and 9 against 7, just to map out the paragraphs coming up. He's going to talk about 6 and 7. Then 8 is going to be contrasting to what happened in 6. What wasn't 6 changed to become 8, and what wasn't 7 changed to become 9. So now 6 is very simple because he's just going to say that everything we talked about man till now, that was the original plan. It means when we discussed man so far, the purpose of creation, and therefore min and noshi, what man is. So that was the man before sin, and he's going to say that things changed. So in 6. The first man at the time of his creation was exactly the way in the state that we mentioned until now. Now he's going to just review what he said. He was composed of the two opposite parts that we spoke about, which means he was composed of two opposite beings, which is the soul and the body. And in the creation and existence, there existed two issues that are good and bad. Before he called the shlemus chisaron, here he calls it good and bad. And he was balanced between them. Man was balanced equally between the inclination towards the bad and the inclination towards the good. He had the choice of being able to cleave to whichever side he wanted. It would have been fitting, means the appropriate thing that should have happened, that he should have chosen the good, and thereby empowering his neshama over the guf, and empowering his seichel over the chomer. As he said, that when man chooses good, so that's what happens, he empowers that side, and then he would have become perfected, and he would have been able to have that state of perfection forever. As we said, that was the purpose of, after the Zman Avodah is over, then he would be able to experience the result of his perfection forever. So, in summary, he just said in this one paragraph what he said in the whole paragraph so far. That's the state of affairs that man was supposed to have been before the sin. That's how he was created. Number 7 goes on to explain another point that he also mentioned, but now he elaborates a little bit more. He said earlier that we mentioned also a few minutes ago that Hashem made the guf and the neshama in a way that they are affected by each other. Not that they stay independent of each other, even though there's a fight. But when one wins, that it doesn't affect the other. No, it does get affected. Hashem made it in a way, even though He says we don't feel it. We're not sensitive to it. That's a chiddush to some people because people think that we are sensitive to how level our neshama is, and that's Islam says not like that. A person is not sensitive to know what level his neshama is. But he says that even though we don't feel it, in anu margishim, I'll get back to say what the whole sentence says literally, but the point he wants to say is that it is in the nature of the neshama to be able to purify the guf. That means that this combination of man that has an animal part and an angel part, the angel is able to purify the body part of man, the animal part of man. He's able to elevate the animal to become less and less animal. That's the point that he says, that even though you don't feel it, he says 2 points that you do feel. We are sensitive to 2 effects that the neshama has on the guf. One is chiyus, the fact that we're living. That's what we see. The fact that he seems to say over here that the life force of man is a result of the neshama affecting the guf. The guf would be a dead meat, and the fact that it's alive is a result of the neshama. The neshama is giving life to the guf. So that's something you see. And also he says intellect. Intellect, he says, is a result of the neshama affecting the guf. The fact that man has intellect is the neshama is giving him intellect. As I said before, that the neshama is sickhless, that the body is physical and the neshama is intellectual. So the intellect that man has is a result of the neshama. That's like sort of in parentheses. He says, even though all that we feel, all that we're sensitive to of the effects of the neshama on the guf are only these 2 points, chiyus and askala, but in truth you should know there's something else that we don't feel. It is in the nature of the neshama to be able to purify the actual guf and its physicality and to elevate it more and more. Until it's be able to accompany, as we said, that the chiyus mason is forever, and the guf is going to be existing as an accompaniment to the neshama, and it has to be on a high level. It can't be this animal that we have nowadays. That's the physical part of man. He has to be an elevated chomer. So the nature of the neshama is to be able to elevate the guf in a way that it will be able to be worthy of accompanying it for eternity on that high level of perfection, closeness to God.
In other words, you recognize that the neshama is that high level, but you recognize that the neshama did its job and the guf is getting better.
The neshama is also getting higher, as we'll see later on. We'll see that also. But the point he's saying here is that that's not his point. His point is you don't notice that the guf is elevated by the neshama. But people, I think this is a big point that we don't have time to talk about. But there's a person sensitive to the elevation of his guf. When he does a mitzvah, does he feel his neshama making him higher, or he's not sensitive to it? The Ramchal says we're not sensitive to it. He says later on at the level of ruach hakodesh, and especially in nevuah, when a person has prophecy, then he can feel it. Then he could be sensitive that he feels something's different over here. But usually what people say, let's say they do a mitzvah and they feel elevated by doing the mitzvah, it's because they think that they did the mitzvah, which could very well be true, but it's only because a result of what they think. Means if he feels, he took a lulav and esrog, he's all excited that he did the mitzvah of lulav and esrog, then we take the lulav and say, Nikdam Rosho, this really is puzzle. And where's all your excitement? His excitement was because he thought. Or he goes to the mikveh and he thinks that he's all pure, then we tell him that the plug was in and it wasn't a mikveh. So it's not a kasha. He felt that he's torn because he thought that he's torn. But he's not really sensitive. If he would be really sensitive to this neshama, then he would say something's wrong. This mikveh, like something's wrong. I don't feel pure, and this lulav, something's wrong. It's not. There's no electricity over here. But people are not like that. Maybe somebody in a very, very high level. But the regular person doesn't have that because we're not sensitive to our guf being affected by the neshama. But the point he wants to say is that that's what should have been. It means that this state that the neshama elevates the guf, if not for the sin of man, the original plan was that it should have been affecting it in a way that the guf would have been elevated. So that's what mankind would have come to if he would not have sinned. That the soul would be purifying the body, purification after purification, until he would have been purified the necessary amount, and then he would have been fixed in that state of pleasure forever. That was the plan. So we're going to stop here, but just to point out the 2 points of how we explain the state of man before the sin. The first one is that it would have been equal force on both sides, both the point of the force of the guf and the force of the neshama would have been equal. That would have been an equal balance. The fight would have been an equal fight, and man would have had the choice equally to choose whichever side that he wants. And the second point is that the neshama would have been able to elevate the guf to be fitting for eternal connection to God. That would have been before the sin. That was the state of man that God created man. That was what's supposed to be. But now he's going to say, next time, we'll see it next time, that 8 and 9 are going to say that he tipped the scale. By tipping the scale, he made that it should be inclined more to one side. And just the opposite of what was the original plan. The original plan, he said that the reason why man has to do it himself is because he has to make himself. He has to not just be slapped onto him, but it has to be that he did it, that he made himself. It's be inherently him. So now the problem is he did the opposite, and he made himself inherently bad. So that's like he made it into his kishkes. He made himself inherently tainted by evil. So it's going to become harder to get out of it. It's not going to be balanced anymore. And the second point he's going to say 9 is that the neshama is not able to elevate the guf and to purify it the way that it could have once he got stained by the sin, the first sin. So now it's impossible to be elevated, and we'll see the results of that next time. So we're up to paragraph 8 to be continued as Hashem next week. Oh, next week? No. Next week's already Tisha B'Av. So we're gonna have to. Okay, that's maybe at the end of the season already then. Unless we're able to do it during.
I'm not against it.
Okay. So we'll see what's happening. We'll have to be in touch with each other to know what that.
No prohibitions to learn.
So if we're not fasting, we have share.
Bez Hashem, Mashiach should come and.